Welcome to the Pacesetter Pod, where we explore and reveal the perspectives, insights, and approaches to deliver great results and growth in your agribusiness through better execution. Here's your host, the Integration Pacesetter, Joe Mosier.
Welcome, Pacesetters of Agribusiness, to another episode of the Pacesetter Pod, where we amplify voices from across the agricultural industry, aggregate those perspectives, and work to elevate our collective thinking around strategy execution. I'm your host, Joe Mosier. Last year, I had the absolute pleasure to connect with Bryan Buerkle through some work that we were doing on behalf of a client in the Northern Plains region. And as a follow-up, we've stayed connected, and I'm really excited to today have the chance to share a recent conversation with you. Now, Bryan's a farm kid. He's a very experienced engineer, and he actually spent about 18 years at John Deere managing engineering efforts in a variety of locations around the world, in the United States, Mexico, Germany, and India, before eventually launching his own business, FarmPro, several years ago. Now, in our conversation, we're going to get into what FarmPro offers and what problem it solves, but there's something important that I want to highlight here. Ag supply chain businesses are commonly a three-legged stool of trading, operations, and logistics. Speaking simply here, trading is the moneymaker, operations acts as the value preserver, think efficiency, safety, and quality, and logistics oftentimes tips into this simple cost of doing business, a necessary pain to execute what you're trying to do. Bryan and the team at FarmPro look very differently at the role of logistics, not as a cost, but as a competitive advantage, and aspirationally, even as a profit center for many of your organizations. We're also going to talk about the opportunities and demands of technology adoption, everything from decision-grade data and workflow management, but also the mindset and the cultural changes that are required to actually adopt cutting-edge technology to drive your business forward. Thank you, as always, for joining today. At the end of the episode, it'd mean a great deal to me if you'd consider leaving us a review on your podcast platform of choice. And as always, I'd love it if you drop me a note to let me know how we're doing and how we can improve. With that, here's my conversation with Bryan Buerkle, a FarmPro. Bryan, welcome to the Pacesetter Pod.
Hey, thanks for having me, Joe.
Very good to have you here. Bryan, one of the things that we like to highlight on this show is not just folks that are out creating new novel solutions or trying to address unmet needs in agribusiness, but also folks who look at what has been presumed to be a sort of price of doing business within the industry, or something that's been sort of just accepted as a necessary pain or a cost within the organization. And folks that look at that and say, that doesn't necessarily have to be, or perhaps we can reframe and look at some opportunity if we revisit these sort of priors in our assumptions. And I don't think anybody in the industry is going to dismiss the importance of logistics in the ag supply chain, right? You do that at your own peril. It's ultimately about moving products from times and places of surplus to times and places of deficit. And this is particularly true at the farm gate. It's also true as you get one or two legs removed from the farm, and all of that is facilitated by truck freight, or nearly all of it. So it's really important, but knowing it's important doesn't mean that everyone's going to see that as strategic, right?
Exactly.
It's just like, well, we just need the freight.
Yeah.
So share with us where you're pushing the industry through your customers, but also through your advocacy to think differently about logistics within the ag supply chain.
Yeah, Joe, we started this journey a couple years ago. I came from ag industry. I'm a farm kid from Southeast Montana, born and raised pulse crops and grain and cattle, you name it. We tried to do it in kind of an arid region of the country, even some corn, believe it or not, with the new genetics. But went pro at John Deere in engineering for 18 years. So I was lucky enough to do that. And through that, and being in the Midwest and all over the world, I could see that everybody really focused on, in the commodity space, we'll call it, right? I mean, grain, fertilizer, feed. Yeah, absolutely. Trading is super important, right? That's a big part of the business. There's a lot of technology, a lot of focus on that. I'm an engineer, so I kind of lean towards looking at where are there problems to solve. I mean, that's what I do every day for the last 20 years. And of course, technology is really a focus of what I do too. But so I'd see that, oh, wow, there's amazing technology, super smart people, lots of focus on the trades, right? Buying and selling a product, whether it's selling to your customers, buying it from people. And on the other end, operations, which absolutely you have to have, they're super important in operations. That's where all the people are, and to make things happen, right? And logistics usually kind of falls between those two a little bit. And as we started this journey of looking at logistics opportunity, I interviewed hundreds and hundreds of shippers and carriers. And over again, I'd hear from the shipper side, the co-ops, the traders, we don't have a tool to measure it. Like, we understand it's important. It's what we do every day. We move grain, we move feed, we move fertilizer. We can't measure it. It's really hard. And then on the employee side, they're driven to focus on their profit center only. And so the grain guys care about grain, the agronomy guys care about fertilizer, the feed guys care about feed, and only within their company. I quickly saw, hey, there's opportunity here, right? You look at Walmart, Amazon, they're moving commodities every day. They're trading commodities every day. That's what they do. And yeah, they have profit centers around the trading area. And they have clearly operations, the warehouses, lots and lots of people. But you know what? They will all both claim that they're logistics companies. That's what they are. There's a few grain companies that if you look on their website or LinkedIn, it'll say, hey, we're a logistics company. Yet they don't have a profit center of logistics. So it's really amazing. So that's kind of that third leg of operations that I think is an opportunity to uncover. And that's where we focus on with FarmPro.
Yeah, so it's like almost a three-legged stool in many ways of, as you said, the trade, the operations, and the logistics, which is the connective tissue, both getting it into your system and then ultimately getting it out of your system to a trade counterparty. One thing I wanted to clarify, you said, you talked to a number of shippers and carriers, and that time and again, they said that, yeah, we know it's important, and obviously we're using truck freight and logistics, but we can't measure it. Is that measurement problem they didn't have line of sight to the cost associated with the freight, the efficiency, the distribution of carriers that they were using, the route optimization? Like, where was the measurement problem? Or is it maybe all of it?
All of it. I mean, honestly, yes, and yes. So clearly, and again, parallel industries have had technology that focuses on this. And the leaders in our industry are very intelligent too. There just isn't tools to make it easy to pull that information out of. And that's why FarmPro focus there was to help provide a tool to do all of that, right? When you think about I'll just kind of jump into what we focus on. The first is data insights. I mean, data insights, the traders, I've always been amazed at the amount of intelligence and technology the industry has around grain and feed and commodity trading, right? Lots of tools, lots of data history, lots of predictive tools on where the futures markets are going, this and that. And then you talk to them about freight and they're like, well, freight just costs what it costs. Oh yeah, Jim over there, Jim in the corner with the hat, he just knows what it costs. Well, does Jim really know what it costs, or he knows what that lane has cost for him in the past? Did he have algorithms to put together 200 shipping lanes to understand what the best prices are and then know where the fuel prices are and to what, grain's moving here, salt's moving there, sand is moving there? Honestly, Jim doesn't know. Jim knows corn, and he knows it one way, and that's what it's always been. Why is there an opportunity? Leadership doesn't know because the data isn't there. And so we focus on those data insights, providing, data history, of course, of what you have done it personally for. But FarmPro actually jumped in to logistics as a service provider too. So we have 6,000 trucks that use our tool, use our app already. We have 250 shippers we've worked with, tens of thousands of shipping lanes we've done. So we not only know your data history, if you provide it, but we can give you some data insights on the industry. Of course, we never share anybody's, specific information of so-and-so company moved from A to B, but we can give you insights in general of, hey, this is what things are moving for over here. And then we attach to algorithms that put together round trips. And the beauty of that is the shippers, the unloaded miles are what we're attacking. The fuel pump is going to lose. The shippers and the carriers both will make more money. And very rarely in anything you attack, there's a pie of profitability, and you're taking from somebody else usually to give to yourself. I'm only taking from the fuel pump, which to me is a wonderful thing. Everybody can support that. So that's one of the major areas that we're focused on to improve margins. All those data insights, you can improve margins significantly with your freight and attack those unloaded miles and make your carriers happy too.
Before we move into the next, because I presume there's a lot more than the data insights, and that's really interesting. I'm thinking about this. So you talked about you have over 6,000 trucks that are using the tool in the application across tens of thousands of different lanes. But going back to what you said earlier, when you compared ag to the Walmarts, the Amazons, the other sort of maybe dry packaged good distributors, they said they've got this technology, they've got this intelligence, they're able to optimize their logistics and actually become a logistics company that happens to, handle
Mm-hmm.
toys from China and whatever else they might be distributing to their stores. I would assume that actually one of the challenges that we had and have and still have in ag is if you're a Walmart, you're probably looking with large consolidated carriers that are
Absolutely.
pooling their freight, and so you kind of are able to have a technology installation within a given sort of client or captive fleet. Whereas if you think about the typical grain elevator, the typical farmer, the hyperlocal ag community, it's heavily fragmented, right? Some of those truck drivers, they might have 2 or 3 trucks, they might have one, they might have a truck they only use outside of harvest, that they become a
Absolutely.
truck for hire when they're not in a combine. So is fragmentation part of also what has made this a more persistent problem in ag, or was there something else there?
No, I think that's well said. The Amazons and Walmarts of the world, right? They used to do a lot of their own logistics. And like you said, they've outsourced it. And those big freight companies then consolidate the information and make better round trip decisions to make money. Ag, it's very fragmented, a lot higher volume of smaller carrier groups, like, 1 to 5 trucks. And that's where the onset of technology has made it easier lately. I mean, everybody knows what Uber is, right? You have a car, you can go drive. Out of our 6,000 trucks, I'd say it's about 50%. I haven't looked at the numbers really recently, but about 50% are farmers. And why do they love us? Because it's super easy to get on to our app, see what shipping lanes are moving out there from up to 50, 100 different shippers. If something's in their area that's interesting, click a button. Yeah, I'd like to take it. So now we're using that underutilized asset on the farm that is now more useful. They're going to do it. They're going to probably have a better rate because of that, because it's just sitting there. And now they can keep busy and make money on the side. So that was actually part of my passion was this is I'm a kid who maybe could have come back to the farm if I would have seen a side gig that was interesting. I had a great career at John Deere, but this will hopefully open up opportunity for younger people to come back to the farm, have a side gig working with dad until dad's ready to retire. Then they take over the farm and, so on and so forth. Leverage those assets to make more money and provide a service to your local co-op, grain trading companies, et cetera. Yeah, that's part of the passion. So we made it easy for them. And the fragmentation it's hard to see now from a shipper side because shippers also don't want to deal with 1,000 different trucks, right? With 1,000 different companies. Well, if they're just dealing with FarmPro as a representative company, it's much easier for them too. They don't post a load on the web and get 400 phone calls. They post on FarmPro, they get 1 phone call maybe, and then all of our carriers are backed up with insurance, et cetera, to be professionals.
Well, I think there's going to be that uncomfortable if we're thinking about through the eyes of a GM of a small independent grain handler or feed business. Feel like it's becoming a little less personal because your proverbial Jim, who always knew this, suddenly his competitive advantage of 30 years of managing that lane has been sort of competed away by a technology that sits on somebody's phone. And that's real. Like that, you have to account for that. But if you pan back and look at the business, you've actually de-risked the business because now your ability to transfer knowledge, transfer the duties of managing the logistics within your business becomes a lot easier because that store of knowledge is no longer sitting between someone's ears that leaves the office at 5. It's actually sitting on a server and accessible real time all the time forever. So beyond the data insights, what else is FarmPro also driving in terms of maybe benefits on the shipper side as well?
Mm-hmm.
How else do you guys characterize the business?
Yeah. So the data insights to provide for your traders to make better information, improve margins, right? The next one is streamlining workflow. And the tools that we have, and we've done pilots with one of the top 5 companies in the grain industry and a couple of different co-ops. All of them have shown about a 3 to 4 times improvement in workflow. That's man hours, right? That's cost reduction. That's stress. That's customer service to your clients. All of those are improved through that streamlined workflow. The last thing is cash flow, but we'll focus on workflow first. So as soon as your trader makes a trade, there's lots of technology with the ERPs too to handle the contracts, warehouse management, etc. Even digital scales that can say, hey, that grain came in and this is the contract it's associated with. But what's missing is what carrier took it, what's the plan for logistics, and then also those round trips come in again too. You're manually calculating what's the best way of doing this, and oftentimes by profit center. So grain does their thing, agronomy does their thing, feed does their thing. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to co-ops or even seen it with our own trucks that we're putting together round trips that they didn't even know about. The feed division called us, the grain division called us. They hired us both ways for one-way hauls, and it ended up being a round trip for one truck. If they had just communicated amongst themselves, they'd have got it done. Our system just makes it so obvious and that the round trip is right there in front of you. Just click here to take it. That's so some of the things we do on the streamlined workflow. But of course, we're dispatching to the carrier on an app. The carrier gets instant notification. Carriers can see shipping lanes, so they're driving by empty. You'd be surprised how many co-ops too, even though it's a short haul, they're like, oh, we don't advertise this. We just use the local carrier, but there's long haul truckers coming back empty. They'll pick that up for very cheap because it's better than bouncing home empty. Well, if it's easy to connect and pick it up, they will. So we've done that. Again, we've taken that friction away from that communication and made it very easy on both sides to allow that to happen and move that commodity cheaper and more efficiently.
And presumably that long haul carrier that maybe they have hauled for that location before, maybe they haven't hauled in a long time, maybe they never have before, but them taking that lane, taking that load, I would presume there's a pre-qualification process. So they carry the proper insurance and licensure and certifications, et cetera, so that the shipper has the confidence, that pre-screening and pre-qualification before they actually drive in the lot and are then become the custodians of that product in service of executing that trade.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, again, why we called ourselves FarmPro, because they're only professionals that we've done those background checks on, that we have extra insurance on, and we know they have the insurance requirements. And we actually automated checking their DOT every day, things like that. So these are all actually automatic services when you work with us that you didn't even think was a risk to your business. But to be honest, it's a risk that, DOT, they don't tell you as a shipper when somebody loses their DOT license. You look it up once a year, most accounting departments do. Oh, shoot, they lost their DOT. They've been working with us for 6 months. It's a huge risk. Oh, they lost their insurance. I didn't even know that. We facilitate all of that and lower the risk for your business too. And then, of course, we actually, because we have all this data management, guess what? We're rating all of our carriers too for performance, on-time delivery, their say-do ratio, their use of the app for GPS tracking. So we can track those carriers too, give you ETAs, things like that. If they're not using the GPS, if they turn it off, if they're not delivering on time, their say-do ratio is low, we're going to give them a lower grade and let you know. Or, believe me, we've kicked plenty of carriers off who did not perform well as well. So that you kind of get that extra customer service with using that's our open network carriers. Now, your local carriers, you can pay direct and deal with direct in our system too. You don't have to work through us as a broker, but it's just an option that's out there.
Interesting.
But yeah, coming back to streamlining the workflow, essentially, we just make it easy, right? We make it easy to communicate with the carrier. If you have to reroute 7 loads, 7 trucks, right now you'd be calling 7 guys or texting 7 guys. It's 2 clicks of the button and they're notified on the app. And you see their GPS, you can see that they moved and they're going to the right direction. Just those kind of little things. It's already tied to the contract, is already tied to the load. So when it comes through for accounting, they have all the contract information tied to that load, no manual typing. And I should come back to that. The manual typing is really exciting that we're replacing that. Essentially, the carriers take a picture of the weight tickets on the origin and destination. I mean, if you've already invested in electronic scales, great for you. But if you haven't, you don't need to anymore because AI can read those tickets and digitize everything for you just like the digital scale would have. So through that picture, it's digitized. Every ticket, every load, every lane, every contract is tied together and handed to accounting on a silver platter. To be honest, the pilots that we've shown, the bookkeepers who are doing this every day, it's an 8-hour day job. It's about a 30-minute day job after implementing our system. Huge savings in cost, and hopefully you can find, better uses of that person making you money rather than costing you money typing in weight tickets into your ERP. Along with that direct ship, a lot of, clients do direct ship, meaning the farmer takes it directly to a processor underneath maybe the co-op's trade. They're manually tracking down those weight tickets maybe 2-3 weeks later, trying to reconcile to the processor's information. It's automatic when the farmer uses the app. And the farmer's encouraged to use the app because then they can see where they stand on every trade. Just, opening up the app. Oh, look at there. I'm on 80% done with that trade. Or I've got 3 trades. I need to pick which trade it's going to go to as well, which is also just a lot of confusion for the customer, the client, also for your bookkeepers, and wasting a lot of your traders' time dealing with that stuff instead of course, making more money.
Poorly executed mergers and acquisitions destroy more value than they create. They can set your company back years. To defend your firm's position in the marketplace, you need access to the leading practices that unlock the greater potential of your people, processes, and systems. If you are undertaking a company transformation or pursuing an acquisition as a vehicle to grow, set up a call with Joe by visiting www.moshercg.com.
Well, I can speak from experience at the elevator, sometimes particularly during harvest or when you have part-time drivers coming on or new drivers, the application at the scale and reworking tickets and split loads and the amount of anxiety it induces, conflict that it incites, and then just the rework and the friction of that rework and knowing that there's going to be the next day is going to be fixing what already felt like a painful day before, removing that or at least minimizing that's a big deal along the way.
Yeah. So that is a good point. I mean, the lack of stress to everybody, the improvement there as well. And just saving the time. Like I said, 2 to 3 times savings in your team during those stressful times. Wow. Wouldn't that be amazing? You have 2 to 3 more time and it's not everybody in your team. It's just in this particular workflow, but every hour counts.
So if I may ask a question here, so the solution as you're laying it out, and I know there's more to it, and we can continue to talk about that. And obviously, it enables people to have this pretty dramatic shift in how they look at freight and logistics within the context of their business. It has some improved margin capabilities, cost reduction, efficiency. So a lot of levers that it would pull to actually be to the benefit of the shippers and the carriers. But this also is going to require some pretty big changes. I'm kind of pulling at something you said here about maybe 5 minutes ago. So one, you need to, you guys are working to get your customers to say, okay, we're going to think about freight differently. We're going to think about logistics differently. It's now going to be potentially a profit center for us, or simply the cost center it's going to be much reduced in terms of its cost impact. But you'd also mentioned how there's that internal fragmentation among the co-ops where you have the grain division has their haulers, the feed division has their haulers, agronomy has their own haulers. And I know from experience and from projects that we've done where that is not just something that happens by default and people would be totally open to change. Yeah. Right. Those are fiefdoms to be defended. I've got my carriers. I've got my drivers. Sometimes it's reinforced by the farm and by the customer. They only want to see certain drivers on the scale.
Absolutely.
But so you're trying to drive dual behavior and mindset changes of think about freight and logistics differently, 1, and 2, we're going to pool all of our freight demands within the business. In your work in helping implement this technology within the carriers and use for an example a co-op, Bryan, how does that go? Like what do the folks that do it really well, what do they have in place that makes it successful? And then also where are the pitfalls and the struggles where just the nature of a human organization maybe runs headlong into the promises of the technology.
Yeah, we've definitely run into this, the status quo syndrome, right? That's like the hardest part is to change. Change is different. It's difficult for people. And every time I've shown this or even talked about this with any executive at any co-op or large commodity trading firm, everybody quickly understands the opportunity, right? And then they lean on, oh, this is going to be really hard to implement. So that's why we focused on basically, how can our tool be first and foremost just used to make everybody's life a little easier in their current workflow, the way they currently do things. So what that does is basically you can implement this. Just one trader could implement it, or just one logistics person could implement it, or just one bookkeeper. So we've made it so you don't have to cut everything off cold turkey and change every process for every person. You can slowly bring it into the organization. Those early adopters who have interest in maybe some wanting to do something different can use the tool and not disrupt any of that current workflow. Because to be honest, we're replacing mostly Excel spreadsheets or just Jim who says he knows what this costs, right? Because there was a gap between signing the contract and the ERP and the warehouse delivery. We're that gap in the middle that's, like I said, it's usually Excel spreadsheets. So yeah, we're replacing the Excel spreadsheet, but we can do it with one or two people because it's an uncontrolled process already within these companies. And then once they start using the tool, they're like, wow, this is easier. I don't have to make 15 phone calls to trucks. I can click 2 buttons and talk to the 2 that are really important to talk to, and everything happens. Boy, I didn't have to fix those weigh tickets 3 weeks later that I forgot to add detention to because we did it in the system automatically. Bookkeepers don't have to type in stuff as a farmer drops 2 weeks of weigh tickets on their desk. It was already in the system 2 weeks earlier ago, right? And those types of things. So people tend to adopt it, and you could adopt it slowly. These new ERPs, I feel bad for a lot of the leaders who have to, and it's usually necessary to make changes, but you don't have a choice. You have to do a hard cutover. And that's really, really hard and scary for the leader, for everybody. It's change for 100% of the people using the system. Ours, one person can do it, slowly adopt it. And the beauty of it is leadership's beginning to gather data. They're beginning to see those insights. We're not going to force them, agronomy and grain, to work together. But as they're moving trucks, and as one person from agronomy, one person from feed, one person from a grain is using it, that data just percolates, and the data is shown to leadership, and the data is shown to the logistics people. Wow, there's opportunities here. And the idea is the changes happen more naturally as you use the system. Of course, you'll get more value if you cut cold turkey and get everybody to change from day one. But, I was a leader at John Deere. I was a global engineering manager. You couldn't just make changes with everybody on day one on process. So we've really focused on making it a slow implementation as possible by department. Even let's say accounting doesn't want to use it, no problem. We make an invoice that looks like it came from the carrier. Accounting won't even know the difference. If logistics guy doesn't want to use it, no problem. The trader can still use it for data insights and get value. Logistics wants to use it in just fertilizer, no problem. Adopt it, use it with your trucks. It's really able to implement it piecemeal like that.
So then, but you're actually giving the optionality to the executive team who's going to make that determination of how hard do they want to push that change.
Precisely.
Right? It's the ownership is still within the business. But if we think, I'll just put on a skeptic hat here for a moment. If I think about, who stands to lose? So if we come back to this co-op that is moving feed, they're moving maybe some fertilizer, they're moving a lot of grain, and they've got some guys that outside of harvest times, farmers, they drive for them.
Mm-hmm.
Might not those guys who are actually, they would benefit from the solution. The co-op's going to benefit from using the solution, but they don't actually want to change carrier. But if those guys aren't the quickest to be on the app, grabbing the lane, might not a more disciplined operator front run them and capture the business and choke out some of these smaller operators? And again, I'm trying to think of what's the real felt impact within these small communities where, yes, it's inefficient. Maybe it costs a bit more than it should, but it also provides some pretty vital income for these part-time off-season drivers.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I would challenge a little bit on, out of all of our truckers, with 6,000, right? I don't have the exact age of them, but I've talked to probably at least 1,000 of them, and we rarely have problems. It's amazing. Like everybody, my dad, 72-year-old dad, was one of our testers, right? He's a farmer, and we made it super simple. And because we developed this from a carrier perspective from the beginning. Now to your point, though, there's some who are going to absolutely refuse. And what we've done is we said, all right, we still allow a dispatch with a PDF document that you can mail to them or email to them. And it's a click of the button to email it to them. And then when the tickets arrive manually, potentially, in that case, if they refuse to use the app to take pictures, guess what? Instead of your bookkeeper saving 7.5 hours that day, they can scan it into our AI system and scan them real quickly. And the AI reads and distributes it all accordingly in their ERP. They only saved 4 hours instead of 8 hours. Oh, well. It's still a savings is the point. Maybe not quite as big as it could be. So yeah, and I understand that. I mean, a lot of farmers who they're part of the co-op, you want to give them the business to truck in the off season, even if they refuse to use the technology. So we definitely made it possible to do that. But the flip side is a lot of these guys who refuse to initially, and this is where kind of the cash flow comes in. They start telling them, well, you know what, you don't have to do any invoicing if you take a picture of the ticket. I don't have to invoice? No, you just take a picture and the invoice comes automatically to the co-op. There's zero paperwork. And if you use QuickBooks or whatever, or even if you don't use QuickBooks, it's PDFs of invoices we'll send on your behalf and we'll give it to the carrier too. If it's a stack that he gives to his accounting at the end of the year, or if he uses QuickBooks, he can click a button and upload all those invoices. It's all there automatically and in minutes, meaning if the co-op chooses, they could pay him within minutes too. And that's what we do for our carriers. When they're FarmPro carrier working for FarmPro, they have the choice to get paid right away. And that really encourages them to use the app because, oh, wow, I get paid right faster. I don't have to do paperwork. Sure. Taking a picture is way easier than making an invoice. So all of a sudden, that friction barrier is less and less over time. And that also actually presents a new margin opportunity for co-ops. The trucking industry, a lot of people don't really understand this, especially the over the road, the long haul guys. Factoring is what it's called. And it's 2 to 3% that they're essentially credit card companies they pay the carrier right away. And then let's say it's a large conglomerate that takes 2 weeks to pay or a month to pay, but the carrier got paid right away. And then the conglomerate pays the factoring company. So they take risk, but they take 2 to 5%. Like it's a huge amount of money.
So you give up 5% in exchange of getting paid in 5 days instead of 60, for example.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So you can all of a sudden offer that carrot to your carriers. Hey, you get paid fast. And also it's a margin opportunity for you to click that button, take that picture and get paid right away. And of course, we make that, easier is the idea.
And so then FarmPro is backing that and taking on that asset in terms of the payable from the shipper, and they're paying out early. How do you manage that as a business if you're not factoring and charging that percentage? How does that make sense for FarmPro?
Well, I mean, we do. We charge that percentage as well. Now, we are a broker, so we don't have to be a bank factoring company. So that's how we do it directly with ours. But our tool set, if a shipper, let's say a co-op, decides to use our tool set, FarmPro doesn't have to be in the middle. They can pay their carrier. Our tool set has just made it easy for them to pay their carriers immediately as well, because we have all the system to do that. And it's a little clunky with ERPs and stuff, and everybody just pays out weekly, and they don't want to change. I get it, but this allows them to make it very easy to pay hourly, daily, weekly, monthly, whatever you want. And each carrier can choose, I want to get paid every day, but the next carrier says, no, I don't want to get charged those 2%. Pay me every 2 weeks like you normally do. Zero management by the co-op to do that. The FarmPro system does that automatically for them. And you'd be surprised somebody take that 2% though when they can. It's just...
Well, I think also my earlier question around the smaller carriers getting front runner squeezed out is also partially, some folks are I think we grossly overstate the ag community's willingness to adopt technology, right? Everyone has a smartphone. Everyone's using GPS.
Yep.
They're on the cutting edge. But if there are folks that saying, look, this is just something I didn't want to have change. I just still want Jim at the elevator to call me and tell me where I'm going. You want to create some incentive that will be greater than that default change resistance. Even just saying, look, you can still get paid in the same terms, but like you said, we're going to remove this need to collect those tickets and then submit those invoices in order to get your payment processed. We've now taken that down to a picture and send.
Absolutely.
I think that creates that incentive.
Just this last week, we were talking with a feed trader, and they said that they were willing to implement the fast pay ACH, give it to their carriers for free if they promise to show their GPS at all times. Because then we have automated messages to the feedlots telling them, hey, this is my ETA. And the feedlot can actually look to see where that truck is. The trader doesn't have to be involved in that, saving that trader 2 to 4 hours a day in wasted time just communicating and tracking down trucks and trying to provide good client service to their feedlots. In reality, it's just data could be automated if they share their GPS. And so why not give them 1 or 2%? And they will save money in the end. And so I thought it was brilliant of that feed trading company to be open-minded to that opportunity.
Bryan, in your experience, kind of back to this idea around the challenge of adopting technology, and I talked about earlier, having the behavior and the mindset around, we're going to pool all of our different aggregate freight demands internally. We're going to look at logistics as a competitive advantage, not a cost of doing business. But now let's think about the prerequisites for actually adopting technology such that it can drive value. Many, if not most co-ops, they do have some kind of an ERP system that's functioning in place. Now, maybe they're making day-to-day position decisions, trading decisions, logistics decisions. That's all being captured on a spreadsheet or Google Sheets or some kind of a shared workspace. But it happens in a digital environment, but it looks and feels like an analog sort of process. Are there certain things that you say, look, these elements from a digital competence and technology sort of process infrastructure standpoint have to be in place in order for a shipper to actually get the value out of this? I mean, if you go into a business that has QuickBooks, but then everything else is happening on a spreadsheet, right? They have no ERP. Let's imagine that horror scenario. But would they be able to adopt it? Or what is the minimum basic requirements from a technology standpoint for someone to actually say, this is going to be additive to us and fit in?
I mean, I'd say the people who are going to get the largest value are the complex companies that have multiple business structures, agronomy, grain, feed, long haul trading, things like that. So almost all those have ERPs already, right? But we actually also work with some very, very small trading companies who trade and own their own trucks, and they are working off of the QuickBooks situation without an ERP. So the minimum requirement is honestly your willingness to use a computer and a phone. That's really, if you're open-minded to that, you're going to get value. If you have no ERP, we allow you to type in your contract information by shipping lane. If you have an ERP, we can pull it from your ERP, the contract information. On the back end, if you have an ERP, we can send what was delivered to your ERP or to QuickBooks or in a PDF invoice format. So it's all over the board, our type of clients. But again, the biggest value is, of course, the more complex organizations that have fragmented information. That's where they'll get the most value.
Which I think is ironic, because my sort of thesis coming in is that the companies that would probably resist this the most culturally are those that have the fragmented logistics demands, where they look at their carriers as a coveted private resource, and they do not want other divisions getting involved in their logistics.
Absolutely.
And they are the ones that ironically will probably benefit the most from this. And so I think this is the message to the co-op GMs and the COOs and the VP ops that are out there. It might be worth, if you continue to fight this issue of not just the lack of visibility to good decision grade data, And if you feel like there's inefficiencies in your processes, but ultimately you're saying, look, I just know that we don't have line of sight to our true freight costs and we're not optimizing backhauls and round trips, and we're fighting culturally to get anybody to actually take this seriously,
Yes,
that might be the trigger to start looking at something like FarmPro.
absolutely. And like I said, the beauty of it is you can introduce FarmPro just for all the other benefits to each person using the tool first. And you're gathering the data in the background to help convince everybody later how important it is. And, I'm not saying you should restructure to a logistics profit center from day one. Keep your normal profit centers, and then we can show you the data to see if that makes sense or not. And at least be able to help everybody make better decisions and also get rewarded, right? When the grain guy makes a trade that doesn't make as much money because there's fertilizer coming back from there, that grain department should get some of that reward too.
That's
Our
right.
system will allow you to do that very easily and share that freight distribution for the whole round trip, not just the one way, and make the right decision for the company, not just for that division.
It's amazing what a shared P&L will do to decisions and discussions. And if you can start with the tip of the spear of looking at the shared P&L solely through the lens of how do we use shared freight as a pooled resource, that's a big step forward. Bryan, this is really exciting. And again, going back to the beginning, I love this kind of discussion premised on, at the heart of it, we're just saying, look at logistics differently. Something that you have to do doesn't necessarily have to hurt. And so building a business around that is really exciting, and it's a benefit to the industry. So thank you for the work you're doing. Any last thoughts or anything that we didn't cover today that you think is worth noting, both for the shipper or carriers in the audience?
Yeah, I guess I'd say is the first thing is you don't always have to look at technology as, oh my gosh, it's going to turn my world upside down. You can even just slowly use pieces and parts of it to benefit your everyday life. And in this case, FarmPro, of course, is what I'm selling. But you can gain value. So look at the opportunity to gain value and find the right people in your organizations to be those early adopters, right? And then, believe it or not, it'll happen more naturally, more organically, because it'll come from the bottom up instead of the top down. Top down decisions are tough and to implement. And we've really leveraged this to make it so the data insights, right? Improving margins. Those early adopter traders will make more margin, and everybody will know very quickly because we'll have the reporting to show them. The logistics professional who has 2 more hours a day because of the streamlined workflow, it'll be noticed pretty quickly. The bookkeeper who is now maybe working on accounting problems and helping clients more because they have 6 hours a day, that is huge differences to your business. And if it starts from the bottom up, it's easier to implement. Probably the only thing I didn't get to mention was cash flow. We actually have data on cash flow too that, it's about 2 weeks improvement. Now, I know a lot of co-ops kind of keep that cash flow because they get paid from the processors themselves, and then they can slowly pay out to their customers. You can choose what you do with having that, but the roadblock has been the way ticket, getting it in the system for reconciling. Now you can choose to pay the carrier fast, pay your client faster. What if you could pay your farmer through maybe an online wallet system immediately? That would differentiate you from everybody else down the road by a huge amount. Farmers love to see it in their bank account, right? And not having to come in and pick up checks. So, some of those are differentiation features that, we're willing to bring to, or that we do bring with our system as well. Yes, I guess those are kind of my closing thoughts.
Well, I think, and both of them, it's really important. So I think the first point there around adopting the technology in a piloted or tightly scoped manner can show benefits in one place while highlighting the lack of benefits in other places, where you've actually taken the resistance to change and used that to create leverage to drive change. Because people react to a scoreboard pretty quickly. So I think that's really interesting. And I think in the conditions that we're in right now and the conditions we're likely to be in for the foreseeable future, working capital management is going to be really important in co-ops. When you look at depressed commodity values, higher costs of labor, and higher costs of all the things it takes to run the business, higher costs of inputs, working capital optimization, you can't get to optimization if you don't have visibility and optionality. And so what you just talked about there is you have better line of sight to what those costs are in real time. And then you can take a decision on, are we going to hold that cash to fund operations and pay via terms, or do we want to decide to do something to the benefit of a carrier or a customer, whatever it might be? And I think those are both great. So, Bryan, thank you for what you're doing. Like I said, we will, we'll make sure that we include links to contact you and to get in touch with FarmPro in the show notes. But I just wanted to say again, thank you for the work you're doing to help benefit the industry, and for taking the time from your schedule to join us today on the Pacesetter Pod.
Yeah, I appreciate being here. And just, I got to say, I love being in agriculture, right? The real people doing real work to help everybody in the world. I mean, it's amazing. So lucky to be here. And thanks for helping spread the word, Joe.
Absolutely. Happy to do it. And to our listeners, thank you for being a part of the Pacesetter Pod community and taking the time, as always, to listen, consider, and ultimately take action to improve strategy execution in support of growing your agribusiness. We always appreciate you joining, and I look forward to having you join us next time right here on the Pacesetter Pod.
This is the podcastfactory.com.